Good evening, and welcome back to the Upset Podcast. Tonight, we are talking about mental health in the age of division. Coming up next. Hey, once again, welcome back to the Upset Podcast. We're so happy that you have tuned in on this Sunday evening, and I'm happy that I am here with this wonderful group of people. Hi, guys.
Hello, girl.
Hello,
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. How's everyone doing?
Okay. Look at how balanced it is,
Great.
The two ladies in the middle with red, Keenan and I tell you, Tasha just keeps on matching colors and balancing things.
I'm trying to make us.
That's why she's the big cheese.
Yeah, some exciting things happening this week. Hello, good evening, Miss Rosalie.
Good evening.
Thanks for being here with us. Anything happening this week? Hello, good evening. Oh, it's so weird to hear yourself.
That's my fault. Sorry.
Hello, Mary. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, it's really nice to see people when they check in at the beginning of the show. It just
I know that rain.
Yeah,
it had last night. It was coming in fast and furious.
Yeah. Thank God it didn't last a long time.
Though. Right, that's true. Yeah, it was really strong. But I definitely was happy that I didn't have to water the plants. Say they definitely.
No, it was so nice. My weeds grew higher. I was trying to break it down. It's gotten worse. One rain.
Yes. So, any updates? Anybody wants to share?
Yeah, anybody?
Well, I mean, before we get started,
I just praise God.
Is there a doctor in the house?
I just praise God for his goodness. He is amazing to me. And I just want to give him all glory today that I finished my doctorate.
Yeah.
There you go. There it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Doctor. Congrats.
God is good. He is really good.
Amen. Yeah. We'll be celebrating later, guys. We're going to have a whole show dedicated to those. We have several people on the Upsetters who are completing their doctorate work, and I think Marlene is the first to.
I'm going to be a nurse soon.
Get to this point. So we're going to talk all about the journey, the highs, the lows, the whys, and the no's.
It is definitely something, yeah.
So
that's. I mean, Marlena did a really rigorous program. I mean, there are a lot of folks who get doctorates from, Skippy and Sam's,
Thank you, Sister Wright.
Prayer of Holy Writ, and but Marlena did. She did.
Hers is legit, huh?
She did a real program. I tip my hat.
Did you say Skippy and? Is that a university?
Probably somewhere online, right?
Yes.
Guys, I wanted to bring up something that we had discussed. I think in one of our meetings that I said I was going to bring to the program, and I didn't yet. And I wanted because I really want to ask our audience before we jump into our topic for this evening. And these are some of your. I don't know how I want to phrase them, but I don't want to say church pet peeves or things that and now most of you are pastors, but the things that pastors are saying now from the pulpit. And I had shared with the team that I am now ready for pastors to retire the phrase, turn to your neighbor and say, turn to your neighbor and say. So I want to ask the people out there, how many of you like the turn to your neighbor and say, turn to your neighbor, the other neighbor, and say, turn to the neighbor behind you and say, at the person in front of you and
slap 3 people.
say, I want to know.
I would say it doesn't work at all in the Adventist church. You just shouldn't even do it.
I've seen it done many
It's been
times.
done.
I mean, do people do it where I see people?
I'm with you. No, I just wanted to put out a public service announcement to the pastors out there. Most of us don't like that, and I consider myself a social person. Like I like people. Like I can say I like people. So it's not even about that. Yep. See, we're tired, y'all.
Tired of it. I don't think people like it. Now I might say something. Say this with me, right? Just repeat something that I want them to.
Yeah, see, I knew I wasn't alone in this.
You see that? Always hated it. I'm telling you.
And I get the intent to make it interactive and get people, but sometimes it actually makes it more awkward. And if you turn and your neighbor doesn't turn, or you turn to the wrong neighbor, it just causes a lot of like
turn to the wrong neighbor.
That's they're looking over there, and then you don't have it.
Well, you know,
I just wanted to.
I mean, it became popular in the late 70s, early 80s. That Simon Says worship, you know, and everybody say this. Turn to your neighbor and do this. I mean, you know, Simon Says do this. I mean, it became very popular.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and it had its time.
I've never done it.
Never
done it.
Appreciate that, Tally.
Yeah, I have done it, and I will continue to. Now, this just makes me. I'm just going to double down.
That sounds like Keenan. You hit Keenan. Keenan say, "I'm sticking to it, man."
So Keenan, though, honestly, do you do it once or do you do it repeatedly during the service?
I just let the Spirit lead me.
I'm not laughing at you. It's just so funny because I know how. I don't know if I tried it one time. I just saw people looking like this.
Yeah, see, this is what Ron saying. Some people looking at you like, "Don't even speak to me. Don't."
I don't even turn. You know.
Yeah, I know. Some people don't. They're just like,
you
I
know.
don't want to participate.
No, I do. I do turn when
I do.
Yeah, and all the churches that I've been in, they've been loving churches, so they have no problem talking to their neighbor. That's right.
You know,
Virginia is a special place.
Come on,
you may get away with it in Virginia.
I grew up in Virginia, and we did not do that.
No, but you grew up in Allegheny West. That's the difference.
You know what?
I was about to say, Tosh, your area of Virginia is totally different from
totally different.
Where are you from in Virginia? Roanoke, Tosh?
South Boston.
Oh, good Lord, that's the country.
They should be happy to see each other, Tally. How you do?
Yeah, the only time we talked to each other was after church. There was no talking.
Oh yeah, I didn't use South Boston.
He said your neighbor did not attend your church.
Yeah. I told a person who she kept hitting me, and the person, turn your neighbor, do this, and I turned to her and said he didn't mean us, and because I was a pastor, she thought, oh, okay, she didn't turn to me no more.
Oh my goodness!
I just wonder how people felt about it.
Unwarming, Tally. That was
on a more serious news note,
Sure.
away from preaching techniques. I have been, and I thank our friend Miggs for this, but I have really been interested in the evolution of African independence, especially with the ascent to the leadership of the nation of Burkina Faso of Ibrahim Traore, the young president. He's the second youngest president, a national leader in the world, and he is galvanizing Africa against the powers of colonization in a way that we haven't seen since the Pan-Africanism of Jomo Kenyatta and Julius Nyerere and those men back in the 50s and 60s. It'll be interesting to see how this goes. And there were crickets.
No, I'm impressed.
I'm in agreement with you.
How the names are flowing off your tongue so elegantly.
I remember, I realized that most of us were taught that were it not for a white guy wearing his drawers, swinging from a tree and yelling, Africa would have been doomed. And I used to go to bed at night and say, Lord, and we thank you for Tarzan, for saving a wretch like me, because that's the only thing we knew about Africa. know, and now we are coming to the place where we understand, that the vastness of Africa. We need to stop talking about African culture because
Yeah.
you got over 50 nations and they
Yep.
all have. Look, Nigeria has more than 4 distinct large groups of people. So
Absolutely.
there's no one Nigerian culture, and we need to understand, this continent better.
I agree. I mean, I haven't gone to Kenya about 6 years ago and then haven't gone to Ghana last year. I mean, I knew I was in the continent of Africa and I had been there before, but it was just like, it's still a whole different world, literally. Like,
It
and
is.
for me,
Yeah.
it made me say, I want to travel to a different country ever so often. I know I can't do it every year because the culture is just so different, and all of them are rich, but they're unique, and they're more than willing to share their history with you. And there's something about hearing it from the people in the space that makes it extra special. So I'm with you, Talia.
Well, speaking of Ghana, I think it's little known in the world that Ghana has one of the most advanced automobile industries
Mm.
in the world.
Hmm.
They have a car brand called Kantanka. If you look it up, Kantanka or Ghana automobile, you will see some of the most advanced piston-driven and electric cars in the industry. Fabulous cars, would put Tesla to shame.
Wow.
All manufactured in Ghana by Ghanaians. It's amazing. Look it up. You will be amazed.
Yeah, there's a lot of great industry there. That's a lot of people are relocating.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I knew that I needed to educate myself and re-educate my people when one of the churches, and every church I had a building program except for West Church. One of our churches, a gentleman started coming to worship with us. He was an African architect. He had studied in Europe. He was, just a really smooth brother. And when I came to my church and said, he's been coming to our church, we didn't know he was an architect, we should hire him for our building program. One of my members said, Pastor, we're trying to build a church, not a hut.
That's just
Wow.
And I realized that as Black people in America, we have been taught to hate where we come from.
Mercy.
And to verbalize that, that's sad.
And she wasn't being insulting. She just,
She really thought.
she was just saying, he don't know nothing about building a real building. He's from Africa.
Oh my goodness.
And another member said, what does he know about building a church?
Oh my goodness.
Okay, well, we have a lot to learn, but thank you for bringing that to our attention, that stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, it's time for us to jump into our topic for the evening, and Sir Keenan is going to lead us in our discussion.
Lead on, Keenan
All
Eternal.
right. Okay. So the topic for discussion today is mental health in the age of division. Now, as you all know, or maybe you don't know, but May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Okay.
All right. So I will always advise everyone, go, if you have not seen a therapist, go see a therapist. If you don't like your therapist, go see a different therapist. But just get a check-in with somebody. I think everybody needs Jesus and a therapist.
I got that shirt.
Yeah. Everybody needs Jesus and a therapist. So in the political climate that we are in today, with so much going on, you just cannot keep up with the new administration in the White House. And so a lot of this stuff brings division. I could go on and on with the types of things from here's somebody's phone.
Sorry.
From DEI, from taking away DEI to the immigration policies. I know somebody, I don't know him personally, but who has been picked up by ICE.
Wow.
So this is real. And this is impacting people's lives, the things that's going on with this new administration. And so how does division with what's going on in politics and the 24/7 news cycle, how does that impact someone's mental health? Well, in a few ways. Number one, when you feel like you're not in control You feel like you're in a place where you may lose your job.
Mm.
When you feel like you're in a place you just can't get a grasp of what's going to happen next, that brings on anxiety. Because in some sense, we all want control. We want to try to control. That's why we have schedules. That's how we have planners. It's all that help us to get some sense of control. But when you feel like you're out of control, you can't control things, it can bring on anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so now when you feel anxiety, what happens is that your nervous system, it goes into fight or flight response. It's trying to figure out what to do in survival mode. Your cortisol levels is rising. And if you are always in fight or flight mode, if you're always in survival mode, that's extremely detrimental to your mental health. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're listening.
Okay, something seemed like something went out. Okay, so
we should have all just froze like this and let him wait a little while.
Right.
See how his mental health responded to that.
I know, right? I know. So what I try to do as a therapist and a pastor, when people are dealing with whether it's PTSD or if they are just feeling this, just anxious, they don't know what's going to happen next. I try to help them with lowering their, or should I say with balancing their nervous system to help them remain calm. I'm not one of those therapists that say, hey, let's look at your past. Let's rehash everything that you have been through. I don't even go down that path. I go straight directly to what's happening to you when you're feeling these emotions, when you're feeling anxious because you've been watching the news all day. What's going on when you're feeling anxious because of the past? And now this reminds you of something. So you're just anxious. So I do a lot of mindfulness and meditation to help bring their levels, to calm their nervous system, to calm it down. So
may I ask a question as you're going?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So are you suggesting that mental health or mental illness is triggered by environmental factors, things that are going on around us rather than things that are going on that are organically within us?
Now that's two different things. So you can have a chemical imbalance.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Okay.
But because of the environment, it led to that happening to you. So for instance, if you had experienced any type of trauma in your life, right? And so now you've been in fight or flight like this the whole time in your life, right? It could cause autoimmune disease. It could cause your whole nervous system is damaging your your immune system. So all types of stuff can happen to you because your body is just trying to survive. And we were not meant to be in survival state all the time. Did that answer your question in time?
Yeah, I mean, and then that's part of it. I mean, but that's still talking about the environmental edge, how things outside of us produce changes within us. But I was just wondering, can mental illness come from people who don't have any of those external factors, where nobody's chasing them, fighting them? They're not fighting or flighting. They're just,
Yeah. I mean, chemical imbalance that can happen. That could just happen. Absolutely. That definitely can. But what I'm definitely talking about, what I'm addressing is just being in this 24/7 news cycle that we have with this new administration. It's causing a lot of stress on people, and they're just very anxious, even more on edge than before, and so we have to learn how to calm down and relax, and so here's one of the things what I do. I just give y'all this for free, I got right.
You're not gonna charge us. Okay,
No charge, right. So one of the things is mindfulness, right? Y'all have heard of mindfulness? That's being present. So if you're pulled too much to the past, if you're thinking too much about the past, that can cause depression. If you're pulled too much to the future, that's anxiety. So you want to be present. If you're pulled in any one direction too far, that causes problems to your mental health. So what I do for mindfulness is just tell people to sit still and take deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. slow breaths, fill your lungs with as much oxygen as possible, and slowly breathe out, right? And that helps you just focus on your breathing. And that helps you to become present. That's one way. It's several other ways, but that's the one that I like the most, right? And then from there, after they have done that, then we get into meditation, right? We get into meditation. And I don't want to go too deep on what I do for meditation, but pretty much
Tell
just
us.
getting
Please.
into, all right, since you asked, sure, why not, right?
Yeah,
Right.
we know you're in that room chanting somewhere. Go ahead.
And see, this is why I see people hear meditation, that's what they think of, right? But we're supposed to meditate on the word of God.
Oh, okay.
Preach it, Pastor.
Day and night.
If anybody ever tell you, hey, it's time to meditate, clear your mind, no, you never want to clear your mind. You want your mind focused on something. So meditation, the way I use it, the way I teach it, it helps to deal with your past. So I give them a scripture. Yeah, I've heard me say this before maybe, but Matthew 3:16 and 17. So Tally, that's the Bible, right?
Okay.
Just let you know that. Right? So in Matthew 3:16 and 17, Jesus was baptized. He came up out the water and he heard the voice of God. God the Father said, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." Now think about this. Jesus Christ did not he didn't make any miracle, didn't raise the dead, didn't do any miracle, but yet God the Father says, "This is my Son that I love and I'm well pleased with him." Then the very next chapter, the devil tempts him. He says, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread." But because Jesus knew who he was, he didn't have to prove nothing to anybody. He didn't have to be anxious about anything. He didn't have to react. He just respond. And so what I tell people, meditate on those two verses and then process your entire past through that lens. And after people have done this for a while, they will begin to realize that now when things happen, they don't have to react. They don't have to go through life trying to prove something to anybody because they are assured that God is well pleased with them and they can move through life with less anxiety. Right? Then after we do that, we get on to manifestations, right? And that's so you simply just saying I am statements. Death and life is in the power of the tongue, right? You're just saying powerful I am affirmations about yourself. And once people have done that for a couple of weeks, they come back to me and say, wow, I'm more calm. I'm not arguing. I'm not uptight. And they're just more relaxed. So that's what I try to help people navigate through. Now, there's one caveat. If you experience some trauma in your past, it's harder you have to do even more work to become calm. All right. So that's the one thing. So I want to throw that out there. Now I do want to say this. I want to ask a question. I got another angle I want to go with this, but I just want to ask you all, what are you doing with this 24/7 news cycle? What are you doing to cope with all this madness that's going on so that you will remain calm? What are you all doing? Upset?
One of the things I do is that I get balance. My news sources do not come from one place. There are those who are subscribers of CNN and Fox and MSNBC. I cross-reference and check everything because there is an industry in headlines. There's an industry in getting you, just like there's an industry in link baiting, YouTube link baiting. You put up a headline, oh, I want to see what that's about. And you click, and sometimes it's not about what the headline suggests. But I think what helps people to get a balanced view is to look at multiple sources to see whether the headline or the breaking news story really pans out. And if you go back to 9/11, when that was first being reported live, Okay, there were so many inaccuracies. But think of the thousands of people who were watching those inaccuracies and formed their opinions based on a infotainment station, with Ken and Barbie dolls giving you the news. You think, oh, that's the truth, and it's not the truth. Many times it's exaggerations. Many times it's motivated and conditioned to get a response from you, whether it's negative or positive. We are being played daily. So the way to get balance and understanding is to check other news sources, fact check what you hear before you come to a conclusion of what is true and what is not. Because in reality, we have basically three types of news feeds. There is a left, there is a right, and there's a more central news feed. Usually central news feeds give you the more accurate version of really what's going on, because you've got, mainstream media is either left or right. So depending on where you fall in the political spectrum and a predisposition or bias you may have, you'll go with Fox News or you'll go with MSNBC. And that can bring on anxiety because we're conditioned to receive it in that way.
So for you, Chuck, it's about getting balanced. That helps you.
Absolutely. I use several news aggregators. Once I hear a headline from, mainstream media, Trump has done this, or Biden is that, or Congress did this, I immediately go to my cross-checking to see how the facts bear out. There was one content creator, independent news reporter, who took clips from all of the mainstream media on a major story. Almost all of them recited the teleprompter script word for word. So it's planned. And news goes through in general. And I think, Tally, you could speak to this because you've worked with radio. Sometimes news feeds go through 3 filters. Okay.
Yeah. I was.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was once a part of the the news cycle, and I remember, I would have to be up by 7:30 or so. I was checking news sources, and my show came on at 4:00, and from 4 until 7:00, you had to be pretty much prepared for anything. And so I don't know about Charles, but for me to get peace and balance, I drink a cup of tea, like this.
That, Of course, I think from the mental point of view, as you alluded to, Keenan, there are some biases and some trauma predispositions that we're carrying with us. And we don't know what's happening, but because your life experience goes one way or the other, will cause you to acclimate more towards one headline versus another. Your next door neighbor could get all upset about a headline and you could be perfectly calm because of your predisposition, your bias about the news or whatever the item is about. So I think for me, what I do is I hear a breaking story, even if there's a tragic story, like an airplane crash or whatever. Usually the first one out of the gate, because that's how news organizations compete against each other. Usually the first one out of the gate is not quite as accurate as it really is. So when I hear the first headline, I said, okay, let's see how much of this is true. And how many of you've heard headlines and you've heard them, pull back what they thought were facts. They had to pull them back because they weren't accurate. And yet there are people who will react emotionally to an erroneous headline.
Oh yeah, we knee jerk.
Yeah.
I know. I see Tammy Lewis mentioned, that passage in Isaiah. I'll keep them in perfect peace whose mind has stayed on me. But we get diverted. I mean, and unless you're in a monastery, it's difficult to 24 hours, 7 days a week to think, God, 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 God. You got children, you got bills, you got work, you got the world around you. But the fact of the matter is we really, and I think Keenan will agree with this, our brains were not meant to grapple on overload with things that are outside of our realm of influence. And when he talked about meditation, you have to actively learn how to retreat from this very, very busy world. And here's what really bothers me more than anything else. God has given us a tool to help us with that called Sabbath.
Come on. Mhm.
But on Sabbath, we actually gear up more. And even though it's a different gearing up, it's still gearing up more. We've got meetings to go to, activities to deal with, programming to consult with, to the point where our minds are never at ease. We're never at peace. We never bring ourselves to a place of rest, and that's hurting us. And so I think
Very
it's
much
important
so.
for us to talk about this.
Very
Yeah,
much.
that's
I'm sorry.
no, Marlene, again. I just want to say that Sally said, but I come back to it.
So, I am an avid student of the news, but I tell you that it gets so frustrating that I have to turn to something funny. I'll take a break from it. I mean, I just have like a couple of favorite commentators that I just like to listen to, but I don't watch it like I used to. And it is so hurtful. I mean, even we were having a meeting with our community service because they have cut funding for feeding programs. So just for us to survive, you have to partner with somebody, or cut down how many times you serve the public. And then as someone was saying, NPR and PBS, they're being shut down. And so I have to watch something funny, and then I always say
Who do
to
you watch,
myself,
Marlene?
something funny. Clean and funny for you, Keith. Clean. And sometimes I got to go to Lifetime to help me deal with, just watch them kill some men, then I feel better, right?
You watch maybe
Lord have mercy.
maybe Tom and
Lifetime make you feel better, but
maybe Tom and Jerry.
even though they were funny. But yeah, the Bible says a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. So and I am one that loves to laugh. So I go to a place that I can enjoy and feel good, and that makes me feel better. And then on the spiritual side, whatever they're doing, I pray for them in their soul salvation, because God said, pray for your leaders, pray for your enemies, things like that. I said, and then if God, they don't get it together, you are still in control and you will have the last say. So that gives me peace right there, to know that He's going to take care of this. And that's how I handle it.
Amen. Amen. I want to just piggyback on something that Tally said earlier. I know, well, I'm going to assume he was joking, but we talked about drinking, right? Talking about that's how he deals.
I said tea.
I didn't say what you was drinking. I said you was drinking.
Okay.
Right? So you're drinking. So if you experience trauma in your life, right, and you're in a constant state of fight or flight, your nervous system is just always activated, and you're always just on edge. And everything that comes to you, whether it's at work, church, whatever, it brings you back. It just keeps putting you on edge. When somebody offers you a drink or a hit, a smoke, a puff, whatever, and it brings you down, and you never felt down, you never felt calm before, what do you think happens to that person? They're going to want to feel that sense of calm over and over and over again. And that often leads to addiction.
Yeah.
So I bring that up to say that we as a people, church people, we have to be more understanding sometimes, and understand that the reason how they got there is probably because they was trying to cope with their trauma, and so we'll be a little more patient with people who they can't put that cigarette out just right away. It takes a little time. So just wanted to throw that out there.
One of the things that I do for myself, I've developed a
smoke habit.
It's called I've developed what is called a trigger alert. I identify my triggers, And when I get provoked to think a certain way or go a certain way, I pause to see if I'm reacting to a trigger. Sometimes we can avoid conflict and argument if you identify a provocation as a trigger. That trigger sets off your reaction. Now, there's a difference between, a reaction and a response. Takes a little more time to come up with a response. Many times we react before we've thought through a response. So mentally, we are being controlled. And there are individuals who know how to control people like that. They know exactly what buttons to push. They know exactly what triggers to ignite to get you to react a certain way. So I think once you identify your trigger, and everybody's got a different set of triggers. I know I have mine. You may have yours. It could come from a child. It could come from a colleague. It could come from a next door neighbor. They're going to say something or do something that's going to make you react. They've just pulled their trigger, and there you go. So I think one thing, which is what I do, I'm not always successful in it, but I try to evaluate what trigger's being pulled here. How should I respond? Not react, but respond, because a lot of things do not warrant a response. But those that should be thought through. And that means taking your foot off the pedal, hit the brake a little bit, take it off the accelerator. Sometimes have you ever been in a situation where someone says something in a provocative way to get a reaction from you?
Oh, sure.
And you don't respond.
Like Jesus, and he didn't respond.
You don't respond. And so the provocateur is like, well, didn't you hear what I said? Or didn't you see what happened? Like, why aren't you reacting? Because sometimes we shouldn't react. We should pause long enough to give a decent response or no response at all.
And Dr. Keenan, shouldn't we be well balanced people? I don't think we should do too much of anything, at all times, because if you're not concentrating on something really positive, right, it just kind of takes over you. And so to be well balanced, because this is a evil world. So if you turn on the news, after all, you got to turn that stuff off. Don't sit there and focus on it all the time. We know bad things are going on. If you meditate on that all the time, it's going to drive you crazy. So we talk about being over spiritual, but I just believe that God, helps me in every area of my life. And I'd rather, put on some good music where I can enjoy my music. Just make your atmosphere a nice place so that your mind has that freedom.
Yeah, and I wanted to, we've heard the phrase "ignorance is bliss," and I have to say, sometimes as it relates to like everything that's happening in the world, I kind of find myself going in that direction of just not wanting to know, just so I could live in some type of peace. But then there's the other side of we need to be informed. I mean, that's one of the things we share here. You need to be informed about what's happening. So when there is a time for you to engage or act, you can do so with some level of understanding, especially when rights are being, compromised, or there's a time to take a stand or to march or whatever. And sometimes if we become too desensitized, like we go to too much of an extreme, we don't even know when it's time to engage. And so I think sometimes it's hard to find where that line is between protecting your peace, but also fighting for your peace. I think that's part of the struggle.
Yeah, and everybody's different, right? So you may be at a different place where somebody else is. So you got to know your own, as Chuck said, you got to know your own triggers. Like I'm not ready for this. I can't handle this right now. So you have to know yourself. Self-awareness is what it's called. Got to be self-aware. But
a lot of that happens in the church. We don't. That's one of the elephants in the room. We think that once we walk through the church doors, that none of this trauma, none of this provocation or trigger development happens in the church, because everybody's spiritual and positive, and that is not the truth.
Absolutely. And Chuck, I want to segue for something that you said, because I want to bring GP into this discussion. I want GP. So yes, there's a lot of anxiety for some people just watching the news. It's just they're anxious, don't know what's going to happen next. That's what anxiety is just fear. That's all it is. It's just fear. And
Really?
yeah, that's you're just afraid of the future. That's what anxiety is.
Hmm.
That's all it is. But yeah, that's why they say fear is when you're afraid because you don't you're afraid because you don't know what's coming, right? Anxiety attack, you don't know what's coming. A panic attack is you know what is coming. You're panicking because you can see the bear coming. Your anxiety because you can hear it out there, but you don't know what is coming. So that's what fear is. And in a psychological world today, like you go to all these conventions, they're pointing more towards faith, which is funny. They heard one therapist say, one psychologist rather say, the word fear not is in the Bible 365 times. That's quoting the Bible at a convention, secular convention. So they're geared towards more faith. But I want to say this, GP, I'm coming to you. As Adventists, do you think some Adventists walk around, switching from politics now, with this sense of anxiety because they don't know, they don't have the assurance of salvation?
Oh, definitely. I think that there are many people who do not have a clear understanding of the gospel, which leads to that paranoia about their final destination.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I know we're going to talk about this maybe later, but there's a pastor out there who left the Adventist church or whatever. And one of the things that he said was he didn't have the assurance of salvation. And how many of our members don't have that?
Have mercy.
They don't have that. So there's a text, Tally. There's a text in the Bible, Tally. There's a text, Romans chapter 5, verse 1. And it says, now I know Tally, he reads a lot of different things. So, but Romans chapter 5.
In the Bible. It says, this is Paul talking on Tally. He says, therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. How many people don't have peace? Yeah.
And we get sometimes we become afraid. Oh man, am I saved today? I don't know. And then that's just torture. They have no peace. But we are justified by faith.
Yeah. I mean, and as Keenan taught me that we have nothing to fear. And so he says once we get through the judgment and our probation passes and we're sealed and the time of Jacob trouble ends and we get through the latter rain and the time of trouble and we'll be fine. Oh yeah, we were talking about that and you shared that with
Yeah,
I mean we're fine.
Yeah.
I did not say that.
I'm sorry, Ken. I don't want to interrupt that, but I know someone had a question in the chat.
That's a good one.
It had something that referenced something you were talking about earlier, and Vanessa's asking, what can churches offer for youth and young adults who have lots of access to the world's coping of medicinal, you can get it or regular cannabis. It seems a lot of our young people have experienced trauma, and that's what they're using to deal with it. And they feel like they should be able to use it because for them it keeps them centered.
Yeah.
How do we feel about that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, if someone already experienced trauma, you have to go see a professional. I would recommend that they see a professional and let that professional work with them on showing them coping skills on how that they can regulate their nervous system. And it takes work. It's more than a workshop. It really takes some serious work.
Yeah.
Once that already happened, because there are kids like that's what keep them calm. And they'll tell you, I need this.
See what happens when you say the wrong thing?
So Yeah, that was my daughter banging.
Oh, I was scared.
Yeah.
Sound like shots fired. I was,
Yeah,
I was a little bit of
Trauma. Yeah.
it's banging.
But I mean, on an honest level, Keenan, what do you say to a person, especially a church person, who goes to see a professional and they are professionally prescribed the use of medicinal cannabis to help regulate their a mood disorder? How would you respond to something like that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, it's still some research
Hmm.
that's being done. It's not a whole lot of research that's out there, but there's research that's being done because when they begin to legalize it, you know, I was actually doing some internship at a psychiatric center. I won't say where, and a lot of psychiatrists, they would say how dangerous the marijuana is because when you smoke marijuana, that what is it, the THC,
Yeah.
it brushes up against that thin wall between reality and hallucinations.
Hmm.
That's my daughter banging. It's okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, but if you smoke too much of it, then your brain won't be able to tell what's real and what's not, right? And everybody's not Snoop Dogg. You could smoke some stuff and it will mess you up. So I would say try to stay away from it.
Oh, he might be messing. But no, but I've often heard that marijuana is like a gateway drug too, because sometimes if you smoked it for a prolonged amount of time, it kind of like neutralizes itself, and then you want something a little stronger because now you're not, you're not getting that release.
I think research has debunked that some as it being a
Oh, okay.
gateway drug. I mean, but I remember, and this is a personal situation. I was going into septic shock. I didn't know it, and they gave me a drug in the hospital called Dilaudid. Uh, Dilaudid is a drug that is right above morphine, right beneath heroin. And I was in extraordinary pain at the time, and they gave me that Dilaudid, and it produced a state of peace in me that I had not felt in many, many years since my baptism, you know. And I remembered thinking it would be, you would have to be insane to not want to feel this way, to not want to feel this way. And after I had my recent surgery on my back, I had oxycodone, and I'm not prone, I've never sought high, but that oxycodone helped me manage pain, and I needed that. And if somebody had come in and said, "In the name of Jesus, I'm taking your oxycodone," they were going to have a problem, you know, because I needed that. And so, are we biased against people who might need medical assistance to manage organic issues in their lives that have to deal with mood and mental states?
But they're also controlled. I mean, Tyler, you're talking about the opioids, and that's why so many people
Yeah.
have gotten addicted to them, but they have limited usage. And so even if someone was doing some medicinal marijuana, I mean, it should be limited. I don't know,
You
but many
managed? Yeah.
yes, and many of my of our young people, they're just using regular recreational marijuana, trying to get, the same effect. They say, I need it. I need it for my peace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and what do you say? Because they really believe it. You're trying to teach them another way, but how do you get them to understand there, Dr. Keenan?
Hmm.
So my daughter, she's just banging. So say the question. My
Yeah.
wife is doing her hair right now. I don't know if y'all can hear her banging,
Yeah.
but he said the question.
Trying to be, no wonder she's trying to be set free. She getting her hair done. So, what I was saying that there are some reasons people use medicinal marijuana, but we see a lot of our young people who say they're trauma, they're stressed, they use the recreational marijuana, and they say it brings them peace, right? But I'm like you, I read things that it's really not good, for their brains and other health challenges. But they think that it is really beneficial for them. How do we get them to see otherwise?
Yeah, so their example is always, oh, look at Snoop. He been smoking all this time. It's not going to do anything to me. It's not really going to hurt. So that's what I hear. But I tell them this is the example that I give. I said when I was at the psych ward, is one thing that all the young black men had in common is one thing: they all smoke weed. Every last one of them.
All black men?
All the black men, all the young black men. That's what they all had in common. And
I never smoked weed.
That was at the psych
at
ward.
the psych
Been there?
ward.
Oh,
Have you been there? You
Maybe. You don't
Trying to
have
tell
to
us
tell us.
something,
You
Tim?
don't have to
You
tell us.
confessing?
no.
All the young black men, they all had hallucinations. I mean, schizoaffective, schizophrenia, bipolar. They all had that one thing in common. And so I tell them, it's not enough research out there just yet. So I would definitely hold off on that. You know.
So psychotherapy, is that the most effective form of managing, like coming up with strategies, like Charles mentioned, how to address your triggers, identify your triggers and address them? Is that the most effective form of dealing with these stresses, in your opinion, Keenan?
Well, I mean, it's just one way,
It's one way.
Of course, like I said earlier, you need Jesus and a therapist. But you have to have the self-awareness. You have to learn your coping, or you have to learn what are your triggers. You got to learn that. So like if the news is a trigger for you, then stay off the news or just limit it. Whatever it is, you have to really, really, really get self-awareness. And then once you get that, like that's like the main thing, the main part of the battle right there. But yes, talking to somebody, going to talk to somebody and share with them, this is bothering me, get it off your chest in a safe place. That is definitely beneficial. I mean, the studies have shown, you need somebody to vent to. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I like what Sister Rhonda is saying. This is true. And guys, it is true for our young people in our churches.
You mean smoking marijuana?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because smoking cigarettes is down, but smoking marijuana has gone up some. But more than that, I mean, for adults in particular, and for a lot of young people, it's not smoking marijuana; it's the gummies that you are prescribed, and
do gummies,
gummy, and you're not smoking, so you don't have that issue.
Gummies or brownies or anything.
Yeah, I was about to say the brownies and the cakes.
So if somebody is prescribed a gummy to help them sleep at night or help with a mood disorder, is that something that you would direct them away from, Keenan?
No, I mean, if the doctor gave that, so I don't know what's the exact, what's their diagnosis, what they're going through, so I would never say no to the prescription, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you're clear. You're clear.
I'm not getting prescriptions. They getting it straight off the streets.
Right. Well, Tyler's making sure he's good. Yeah. So Tyler, you're clear. But I want to say this though. I would try just let's go talk to a therapist. Psychiatrists, those are the ones that provide drugs. But talk to a therapist, just talk therapy. Let's talk to somebody. And then what can heal trauma? So two things, I forgot to say this. When it comes to depression, one of the best things to help to get you out of depression is becoming active. You got to get out the house. You got to open up the curtains, go outside. You got to get active. You got to get moving again. I help people come up with an activation plan. That's depression. And if you experience trauma, one of the best things to help is relational connections. So you got to connect with other people. You must connect. That's what church is supposed to be for, right? A place where you say, hey, turn to your neighbor. Right? A place that you connect. And some people don't want to connect, but that's okay. But that's what church is supposed to be for, a place where you can connect to one another. And that helps help you deal with the trauma.
So I just want to throw something in here because we're talking about, mental health and just division just being rampant, whether it's, politics, whether it's between family members, your community, your neighbors flying a flag that you may disagree with, and there's tension and you're stressed out because, you may feel your neighbor is a racist and you feel unsafe now because if they support this, then how do they feel about me? And I'm just thinking about like real life examples of how what's happening in the world has just changed. Like they were fine. I'm not saying they were fine, but they were okay. And then within a year, suddenly, whether it's the thought of immigration, because you're seeing your neighbor. I just saw in the news a guy in Phoenixville, not far from me, like 7 miles away, was detained, documented citizen. It's like, okay, this is getting close to home. And so you're interacting with immigrants who are like, no, I can't do this, or I don't want to do that because I have this fear of that. And you're trying to console them. I mean, I'm just kind of, I'm seeing now where a lot of things that didn't even cross our minds before are now heightened in this particular, job loss. We talked about all of that. And so it's like you're trying to find peace. And then everywhere you go, there's something that is seeking to take that peace away from you. And we talk about like not watching the, managing the news, maybe taking the news apps off of your phone. But what do we do in the day-to-day interactions when you go outside and you interact with someone who feels differently than you, or combative, argumentative, and trying to engage? I mean, I know what Charles was saying too, like you just don't engage. But I just feel like there's so many things being thrown at people right now. And people don't have the tools. And they go to church, they feel that sense of calm and peace for the moment that they're in the sanctuary. And then when they drive home, it comes back. So, I mean, I know you've given us a lot of tips, Keenan. So I kind of want to refresh our memories about what do we do when it's like the world is hitting us from so many different places. And we're trying to implement those things, but then something else hits us over here. Like,
right. Well, one, you got to come to the conclusion. What is it that you can control? Right. And focus on the things you can control. The things that's outside of your control, you just realize that's not in your hands. And so you have to practice that. It don't just happen overnight. You have to practice. That's where the mindfulness, that's where the meditation comes in. Meditating on the promises of God. That's why you have to really soak yourself in that, in God's word. That helps. And realize that, because I mean, we all want a sense of control. That's it. Since Adam and Eve left the garden, we live in a world of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't. So how do you navigate in this world of uncertainty? So you have to really just hold on and trust God's hand. And if it's not at my control, I can't let that bother me.
I'm going to touch on one of the things in the show notes that we said we would address, and that's how predispositions or bias come between our friends and our family. This last election divided a lot of people, and a lot of people in their families. You may have one part of your family that was for Harris, and the other part of the family was for Trump. And because of our allegiance to a particular party or an individual, we tend to separate ourselves from people who have a different view. That even happens in the church as well. It happens in boardrooms. It happens in church board meetings. We tend to side with a particular angle, and then we ostracize people because they don't think the way we do. That's a hurtful emotional process and has broken up a lot of friendships, broken up a lot of projects that could be successful because we allow ourselves to be divided. And we have more control over that than we think. Keenan, can you speak to what neuroscience has said about how the mind changes? Some people think that they can only have a chemical intervention for a mind change. Are there some studies that you know of that would suggest or even prove that a person can actually change the wiring of how they think based on their faith or non-faith,
Mhm.
or a predisposition from a childhood trauma?
Mm.
So, because I think, a lot of times we don't deep dive into that area, but, we believe God made an incredible human being. We have capabilities that we haven't even tapped into yet because God put them there.
I
So,
mean,
what can you say from a neuroscience point of view? What have researchers or doctors have found? Let me give you for instance, there was a study sometime about um, studying how people react to bad news.
mhm.
One set of participants acted one way. They were afraid, traumatized, scared. The other side didn't. And they found out in this study that it depends on how a person approaches an issue. Sometimes we put ourselves in our own prisons by thinking a certain way or not thinking outside the box. Sometimes there's a lot of interesting stuff outside the box, but we don't consider it. And I think that's important too. We need to have in my opinion, we need to have a broader range. We need to widen our horizons when things happen to us. So what can you say about neuroscience? And is there any connection with faith and neuroscience?
Mm. Okay, now as far as faith in neuroscience, there's a lot of research that's going on right now. There are a
Mhm.
lot of psychiatrists. They all pointing, not all, but a lot of them, in the conventions that I've attended, they're pointing towards faith, or they're sliding faith in there. These are people that were known for being secular. They're saying there's something there. There's something with faith, you know. But as far as the rewiring of your brain, is a doctor named Doctor. I can see her face. Her last name is Leaf, Dr. Leaf, you know, and she's wrote a ton of books on like rewiring your brain, right? And one of the ways that she talks about doing it is meditation.
And does that rewiring, would you go as far as to say that rewiring can occur in our faith walk?
Mhm. Absolutely. Because it's the same thing as what you're meditating on. What are you focusing on? So the more you meditate on that, by beholding, we become changed. The more you focus on that and focus on that, you will begin to stop reacting, or should I say, and responding, as you said earlier. You won't have those knee-jerk reactions. You can walk through life with less and less anxiety, less anxious. So yes, it has been proven you can rewire your brain. And according to Dr. Leaf, and I can't remember her first name, but Dr. Leaf did a study, and she said that in you know how they say a habit is formed in 21 days,
Mhm.
but she said that's not true.
Mm.
You have to do that 3 times in a row. So habits form actually in 63 days.
Wow.
Mm.
So yeah, so you meditate on it, meditate on promises, and get in a state where you can stay calm, focus on your breathing. With mindfulness meditation, you will begin, your mindset will change in about a little over 2 months. Yeah, Carolyn Leaf. Yeah,
Carolyn.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
And
Right.
I was going to, sorry,
I
just
was
to,
just going to ask Marlena a quick question because
okay,
you
go ahead.
mentioned when we were talking about, substance abuse and marijuana and things like that. And you indicated that you are aware of a lot of young people, whether in your church or within your community, that have gravitated towards, marijuana or some other controlled substance. Have you been able to pinpoint why?
Um, Mostly I hear brings them peace and keeps them calm with just the issues of life, Chuck, is
Right.
what they're say to me.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, I mean, have you ever interacted with someone who said, well, I do this because my mother treated me this way, or my father left them? I mean, was there something specific that they were trying to get to deal with pain or get rid of pain that drove them to a controlled substance?
I do know some of them have had some trying past, and even I work as a physical therapist still a little bit at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation hospital, and most of them will say their trauma and you're just trying to have peace right now, with even day to day. So that's mostly what I get. It's kind of like a little bit of both. The pleasure of peace of mind, like what Tally was getting on that Dilaudid, just that peace, which is why I found out a lot of them, like especially in Kensington, where they are on that fentanyl, because fentanyl is a real, medical drug, and they say it just gives them that place of peace, and they want to stay there, and it makes them so lethargic that you will even see them on the street just in it's not a trance, but just a state of lethargy where they just bend over, but they're not falling, and you see their faces. And so I asked them, I said, why do you want to be like that? And they said, I don't know, it's just my mind is at such peace that I don't want to leave it.
So they're trying to escape something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just the marijuana, but that's everything. Entertainment is a form of escapism. TikTok, scrolling, is a form of escapism. So anything that could feed that dopamine, so we can escape what's going on in the real world. That's what people have turned to.
And one of the things about mental health, and I know we're wrapping up, is it's not just about being concerned when a trauma happens. I think what I'm learning about mental health is that's something that we should be working on daily. So we're fortifying ourselves for life. So when things hit us, it doesn't knock us off our center, because we've been, reading the word, we've been, going through therapy, we've been exercising, we've been doing the things, as they say, so that we don't have to start doing these things as soon as something traumatic happens in our lives. And I think that's one of the things we need to remember, even in our faith walk, with devotion. And this is why it's important to read the word and study the word and really let it sink into our mind, because we forget. I mean, some of us have heard these scriptures all of our lives, and as soon as we go through something, we're like, "Oh Lord," like we don't know that He's our help. But it's just important to stay fortified. And someone asked the question or made the statement, this is why our churches should be the safe space for people to come and not experience division. But unfortunately, we don't even have time to go into it. Sometimes our churches are what cause people to have struggle with their mental health.
True.
So it's, and this is a sad thing, because you would hope that would be the place that you can go and get relief. But unfortunately, we have to do
Wait. So Havis, that's a nice guy. He goes to a really awesome church, by the way.
He said that his pastor was driving him to distraction. But go ahead.
Right. So one of the things when it comes to church is what we have been culturally trained, not just Adventists, just church period, to put on our best presentation of self at church. And so now if you have your best presentation of self at church, when someone is struggling, they be like, wow, there's no way I can keep up with that. They look like they're not going through anything. It must be something wrong with me and my faith. So that could be very, very disheartening, discouraging to somebody. But we have to learn how to just be honest, open, transparent, vulnerable with one another. And people are like, man, I'm going through the same thing that you're going through. We're in this together. But if we're not able to do that and just be real and take off the mask, then we're going to continue. Our church is going to continue just to be a place where everybody just has masks on.
Yeah.
And if I might add, I've been to some, courses on mental health, and one course uses a statistic that stated 1 out of every 4 people have mental illness. So I don't know if you heard a more accurate, because it was been a few years now. So I don't know if the stats changed on Keenan, but you can share with us. So if you look in your church, you count the number. You look at 1 in every 4 have mental illness. That's where there's depression, anxiety.
I mean, somebody up here.
On the screen, somebody is dealing with something, and if people are really broken, hurting people hurt other people, and so you have those kind of issues going on in the church, which then, I mean, that's why the word is so important, and us preachers, what we bring to try and neutralize the mind to give them to a place of hope, a place of hope. So that's why stuff occurs at the church, at least in my findings.
And GP and I were talking before the show how also church can create spaces where it's not just about the service, and that we're creating opportunities for people to build those authentic relationships, whether it's in groups or different activities that the church is doing even outside of Saturday worship service, So I think that that's one of the areas where we can improve because you come to church, you hear a good word, everybody's saying amen. There's someone in the pew saying, oh, they get it. They're all right, but it's not until you get into those small groups and get to have those intimate interactions that you see, oh, they're struggling too, even after hearing a good word, and they feel more fortified. I think that's one of the areas that churches can improve on, creating more opportunities for authentic interactions so we can work together to help everybody do better.
And I like what Daphne is saying right now, since COVID and Trump, and there is a lot of trauma because of the situations that are happening. If you just focus on the traumas in your life and the things that bring you pain, you will stay depressed. But we have to remember as Christians that God is our help. He is our hope. And when we focus on him and in the word that's been said, I mean, we're reiterating that over and over because it works. It works. God can give you peace in the storm. So when you look at John 14:27, he says, my peace I give to you, right? Not as the world give, do I give you peace. So let not your heart be troubled, and neither let it be afraid. And so you have to speak life into your situation. Hey, and I might be talking to people who lost their jobs and things. God give you a better job than you had before. So I'm not being insensitive. What I'm saying is that you have to, as we were talking, retrain your brain, focus on something positive. So don't let people, in another place destroy you. You have to then counteract what's happening to you so that your outcome is better. So I'm telling you, hope in God works.
My final statement, as I know we're closing, right, is that I would caution us to be mindful not to use simplistic bromides and catchphrases and judgmental statements that oversimplify the very complex issue that is human mental health and human mental health disorders. And because it doesn't help when we do that for people.
Yeah, and so I would say to that, Tyler, if you have a chemical imbalance, that's something completely different. I want to say, I want to be very clear.
I mean, even if it's circumstantial.
Right. Well, I said it so. If your doctor prescribes you medication, take the medication. Let's want to be clear. Take that medication.
What about when Keenan, they said it makes it too drowsy, it can't function? What about then?
No, well, then you have to get so that's a good point. Go back to your doctor, say this is too much. So because everybody's different, they have to, and it's unfortunate because everybody's different, they have to mix with the doses until they get the right doses for you. So I would say definitely, like for me personally, if somebody's bipolar, if you ever dealt with somebody that's bipolar, if they're not taking medication, I'm not dealing with them. I'm not doing a session with them. It's not gonna go anywhere. So some people, we're not having a conversation. You come to the office, you're not on medication, it's not happening. And I also want to say this with the oversimplification. Yes, if you have a chemical imbalance, and yes, the promises of God, absolutely. But I want to go back to what I said earlier. You need Jesus and a therapist. Jesus and a therapist. So yeah, just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. And I do want to shout out our Relationship Ministries Department of AC. Since it is Mental Health Awareness Month, there is a mental health series, video series. There's a new video out every week. The first one came out last week, featuring one of our fellow upsetters. Pastor Patrick Graham was talking about SAD. You guys remember what SAD? Yeah, and so you can check that out and other resources right on the website there. So for those who really want to, highlight this, whether it's in your church or just for you personally, there are some resources on the website for you. Visit ac.org/relationship men and check out that video series this month. I think it will definitely aid in what we're trying to do. Just want to shout that out.
I know we're trying to wrap up and we won't have time to deal with it, but I would be good if Keenan, you would elaborate maybe in a future show on how diet has an effect on your mental health. There have been studies that show that poor diets
absolutely
could end up causing poor mental health. So
yeah, because it's all connected.
Yeah.
It's all connected. Absolutely.
Exercise, diet, sunlight. All right. Well, thank you all. We're doing our part to highlight mental health, and we'll continue to do so. And we thank everyone in our comments for sharing, for giving your insight as well. We appreciate that. And thank you, Keenan, for leading us in this discussion and for your expertise. Appreciate you. All right, everyone. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you back here next week.
Take care, everybody.
Everyone, blessings.
Bye.